everyone, and welcome back to our very last session of Tuesday Times Roundtable for the Fall 2022 series. We will pick up again in the spring, but today is our last session. We are happy to have you here for this topic, Building Democratic Economies, How Cooperatives Shift Power to Communities. If you haven't already, the QR code posted up here is your sign-in. It's also posted around the room. If you're here for credit or for Global Learning Medallion, we are happy you're here. As always, TTR, that is sponsored by the New York Times, is linked to a New York Times article. You can read that article at go.fiu.edu/TTR1108. If you get there and you hit a paywall, we hacked you, because at Florida International University, as part of a student and the organization, sponsors a free digital subscription to the New York Times. So if you get to go.fiu.edu/TTR1108 and you hit a paywall, you can go to accessnyt.com, register with your @fiu.edu email, and you'll get the free digital subscription. If you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about when I say medallion students or enacting global learning micro-credential, that is one of the undergraduate student-facing programs that our office, the Office of Global Learning Initiatives, has for students seeking to learn more about global citizenship on campus. You can learn more by visiting our website, goglobal.fiu.edu, or you can attend one of our general information sessions at go.fiu.edu/glinfo. We host those on the very first and last Wednesday of every month. If you are a medallion student or a micro-credential student, make sure to take a screenshot of your sign-in so that you can use that on your points log. One of the other programs that we kind of administrate here on campus is the Millennium Fellowship. If you want to learn more about that, by all means hang out after the session and we can talk more. We actually have a couple of Millennium Fellows as part of the current cohort here with us today. And we are currently promoting one of those, having an event on November 9th from 2 to 3 p.m. It is a Zoom session entitled Between Feminism and History, Women in the Haitian Revolution. You can register for that event at go.fiu.edu/Haitian Women. Next week is International Education Week. Woohoo! And Office of Global Learning Initiatives, along with FIU Global and the Green Libraries and a bunch of different offices on campus are involved in organizing International Education Week. We are specifically promoting two events that we've got going on, but there are many more if you are curious and want to learn more. One of them is going to be Global Games. We'll be on the second floor of PC, that's PC 249, playing games from around the world with students from around the world. And the other is a Ukrainian Student Perspectives photo gallery. This is an extension of our Russian invasion of Ukraine series, where we've been in discussion with students currently living in Ukraine. We've asked them to take a couple photos. We're going to display them and open up more of a dialogue through that. That'll also be on the second floor of the Green Library, this time on Thursday, November 17th. And on to today's session. So TTR, Tuesday Times Roundtable, is the Office of Global Learning Initiative's flagship discussion series that brings together multiple perspectives on current global issues and trends. As we engage throughout the session, we ask that we please use the microphone so that we can hear and learn from everyone's perspective. We'll have some roaming mics when we get to that point when we're asking for engagement. So please join me in welcoming today's speakers. Deshaun Weber serves as the Director of Worker-Owned Enterprises for Catalyst Miami, where he oversees the incubation and training of worker-owned and run businesses that generate and maintain wealth in communities. In his role, he is dedicated to promoting a more democratic, just, and equitable forms of community economic development throughout Miami-Dade County. Previously, Deshaun was a resilience manager at the Miami Foundation, where he led the implementation of collective impact efforts to drive inclusive economic prosperity in Miami. He has held Democracy Collaborative. He has held several roles within the national advocacy and policy organizations, such as the Democracy Collaborative, the Congressional Hunger Center, and Prosperity Now. Deshaun graduated from Northwestern University with a Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology and Global Health Studies, and was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. Welcome, Deshaun. Thank you so much for being here. Also joining us today is Terron Ferguson. Terron is a lawyer, businessman, and global organizer who builds initiatives for corporate and nonprofit clients. After earning his BA in philosophy from Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia in 2008, Terron worked as an elementary special education teacher through Teach for America, took graduate courses on economic policy at the London School of Economics and Political Science, and in 2015 earned his JD from New York University School of Law, where he was the student convocation speaker for his class. Going on to practice law at the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama, under the leadership of Brian Stevenson, Terron advocated against the death sentences and detaining children in adult prisons, facilitated parole hearings, and investigated thousands of lynchings to be included in the EJI's Legacy Museum and National Memorial for Peace and Justice. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Ferguson. And I'll hand this off to you. Or
Great, thank you so much. Everyone hear me okay? So, I'm Deshaun. I work at Catalyst Miami, a local nonprofit that is focused on driving community-based and directed decisions within the areas of policy, engagement, community economic development, as well as services. So we provide a broad swath of opportunities for folks. So if you're ever interested in learning more about that, I'm happy to discuss that too. Let's see. So before we dive into Terron and I kind of going back and forth a bit, I'd love to just get a sense from you all, what's one word that comes to mind when you think about businesses? Money, okay. Money, that's always important. Any other things? Money.
Power.
Power, okay. Interesting. Power. Any other ones? Yep. Hierarchy of power. Were you at the presentation last week with unions? Oh, okay. Just curious. Any other thoughts about business? Negotiation, okay. Any more? Oh, transactions? Okay. Any others? Yeah. Opportunities. That's a good one too. One final one. Anyone?
Community.
Community. Okay. Okay. I like that. I like that one. All right. So the reason that I wanted to ask that in some ways is because you might hear the topic worker cooperatives and not necessarily know what that is. In many ways, a worker cooperative is still a business. It just is a little bit different in terms of the way that workers are able to show up in that workspace. And so we're going to learn a little bit more. So if you didn't have a chance to read the article, I found a video that kind of describes and dives into that topic.
When you book a ride through Uber, up to 40% of your fare is taken by the company before drivers receive their share of the money. But a new workers' cooperative in New York City is trying to change how rideshares work. Co-op Ride is a new rideshare app that's unique from Uber and Lyft in several major ways. First, they promise lower fares to riders. And second, the app takes a lower percentage out of drivers' wages and delivers the company's profits back to the drivers as dividends. Most importantly, the company offers a part ownership stake for all drivers that sign up.
The power of these companies comes down to a simple choice people make of like, what button do you push when you open up your phone to get a ride? And well, now you can push a different button, which actually helps your community instead of hurting it.
The stakes are high right now for rideshare drivers in New York City. This year, Lyft, Uber, and other allied gig work companies worked closely with New York State lawmakers on legislation that would allow them to continue classifying their workers as independent contractors, rather than employees. Though worker advocates have stopped this bill for now, it's clear these companies have their eye on New York. And this level of influence is not without precedent. Nationwide, major rideshare companies have spent hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying to maintain the status quo and have won major victories.
In a very sick and twisted way, Uber and Lyft are taking money out of drivers' pockets and then using that to bankroll a nationwide assault on workers' rights.
That's Eric Foreman, a labor organizer and one of the 3 co-founders of Co-op Ride.
My co-founders are Ken Lewis, who is a longtime driver and transportation management professional in New York City, and Alyssa Orlando, who is a ex-Uber manager who came over to our side.
Co-op Ride is organized through a workers' cooperative, a business model that includes major American brands like Land O'Lakes and Ocean Spray.
In traditional companies, the wealth goes to outside investors and the decisions are made by a management that's accountable to those investors. And that leads to constant conflict in the workplace. And that's why workers need to organize unions. In a co-op, the business is owned by the workers themselves. And so they make decisions democratically about how it should be run. This simple but profound difference of ownership changes everything else. Uber and Lyft, their outside investors are represented by a board of directors which hires a management team whose single-minded goal is to squeeze drivers as much as possible and extract as much wealth from them as possible with high commissions, fees, predatory financing deals for vehicles, payday loans, basically every predatory scheme in the capitalist playbook. Uber and Lyft in New York City, there are regulations that force them to pay the minimum wage, so guess what they pay? The minimum wage. With us, we've set our pay rates 10% higher than the minimum wage from the beginning, and if we can go higher, we will. With Uber and Lyft, commissions eat up to 40% of people's paycheck. With the drivers cooperative, the cooperative has a sort of break-even fee, which funds the co-op's operations, and if there's a profit that comes out of that at the end of the year, it just goes back to drivers as dividends.
That notion of sharing profits with workers stands as a stark difference to major rideshare apps. If you've taken an Uber or Lyft recently, you may have noticed that prices have been high. A recent study showed that the cost of a ride was 49% higher in April than it was a year ago. Some recent surges have made prices jump 50% or more, but drivers report they are not benefiting from these higher prices.
Yeah, I've been driving for Uber and Lyft for about two and a half years. I don't feel included. I don't feel like I'm a part of the community, like of the decision making that affects us.
When I work for these other apps, it was always a challenge to, to talk to a real person.
They don't care about the drivers. They care about the money they're making from you. When you work for Uber or Lyft, you are considered as an independent contractor. How independent are you when they are the one determining their life for you? I'm giving my 100% time to drivers co-op. Why? Because if you have been trying to start your own business, this is it as a driver. The management are the drivers. The people making the decision are your fellow drivers. The board members are your fellow drivers.
Competing with Silicon Valley and Wall Street-backed behemoths might seem like a daunting challenge, but Co-op Ride already boasts a membership of 2,500 drivers in New York City, and those drivers remain unfazed by the battle ahead.
People might not want to join something like this because they just feel like we're not going to be able to win against the big guy. How would we tackle against Uber? How do we tackle against Lyft?
People say, well, how can you do this? And I have to say, how can you do what? Look around. The transportation in this city has existed for over 100 years, and it's almost always been propelled by the labor of immigrant workers and of working class New Yorkers. So we're not really doing something new. We're doing what working people have always done, which is start businesses to improve their lives.
I'm excited, not nervous. Ownership is everything. If you're going to be working, you want to have ownership in something. I just feel like it puts me in the driver's seat.
Co-op Ride has consumers in mind as well. Part of their strategy is to offer riders lower fares.
We'd be very happy for some competition in terms of paying higher wages to drivers. If Uber and Lyft would like to give over ownership of their own companies to their drivers, we would be happy to compete with them on that playing field as well. All that we need for this to be successful is for New Yorkers to make a choice. Instead of using Uber and Lyft to get around, use Co-op Ride. It's as simple as downloading and using an app.
So we learned a little bit more about, I guess, what are the differences in a worker cooperative compared to a traditional business. Were there any big takeaways that anybody had from that video? I'm just curious. Maybe one or two folks. Yeah.
So these co-ops are owned by the workers instead of investors?
Absolutely.
So the workers have more of a say in what's going on because they are the owners?
Precisely. I saw.
I was just gonna say, when they said that it was owned by the workers, the first thing I thought of was credit unions, which is similar in how they work. But it's the members of the credit union that own the bank, let's say.
Absolutely. That's like a financial cooperative in some ways. Yeah. Any thoughts from this side of the room? I'm focusing a lot over here. I don't want to leave you all out. No? That's fine too. Okay, so A cooperative is, as we discussed, a business. It needs to generate income from the sales of goods or services, just like any other business. Where it's different is the relationship that is had between the workers and the business themselves. So it's owned by the people who work there. I'm going to walk us through an example of my time working at an amusement park in Cincinnati, Ohio. I worked in the food and beverage space where I basically worked at a couple different stands selling food. And I'm just going to use that as an example. And I'd be curious, just by a show of hands, how many folks have worked for some sort of food service place? Yeah? Okay, so it's something that folks have a certain sense of. Okay, so it's owned by the people who work there. When you think about a traditional business, when I think about my time at that amusement park, what ended up happening is I got paid a wage. I got paid a wage while the people who owned the business had a say of what happened to that profit of the business. Sometimes they might direct it back into the business and actually update some of the equipment at the amusement park. They might look into getting a new roller coaster, or they might direct those dollars back into their own shares and send those dollars back to the shareholders. So oftentimes within a traditional business, workers, the only time that I might see the profits of the business is if I get a couple cents raise. I got 10 cents raise every year. That was my direct engagement with the profit of the business. Now within a worker cooperative, it's different. As you saw in the video, workers have a say over what happens to the profit. Now, generally speaking, there are three ways that a cooperative tends to direct money within the business. One way is actually back to the workers' pockets themselves. That shows up in the kind of an annual bonus. It was referred to during the video as a patronage. They get that money back into their pockets directly. So it's kind of like an end-of-year bonus. Another way is it goes back into the business. Cooperatives are businesses that are not necessarily going to hold on to a lot of cash. But what they will do is they'll redirect it back into the business where those needs are. And the third pathway is basically into retirement packages of sorts, accounts that are held by the business itself. So imagine the circumstances of if I were an owner of that amusement park, I would have a say of where those dollars went. I could say, actually, it should lead to higher wages. We should direct more money to the workers. It might be that instead of actually buying back the shares and inflating our share price, it could be that I actually think that at the end of the year, we should give more bonuses to the workers. That is a different relationship, a different dynamic that happens within a cooperative business. Now, the second pathway, where there is a level of engagement, is it's managed by the people who work there, meaning that in a traditional business, we're going to do this comparison again. I didn't really have a say of what my hours were. I basically got told, you need to come for this shift, you need to come to this shift. And when I said I worked at an amusement park, I worked in a section of an amusement park. So on Monday, I would be in location A, on Tuesday, I'd be in location B, and they might be on totally different sides of the park, but that was just the card that I was dealt in that circumstance. Now, if I, as a worker, actually had a say in what happened, it would be a different decision. I might actually say that I really like this place. What if it looked like I actually developed some deeper skill sets in that location as opposed to going to all these different places? Within a cooperative, the business is managed by the people who work there, not just one or two bosses, but the workers. And so when it comes to the big decisions of the cooperative business, people vote. So if we decide we want to open another location, we vote. When it comes to what we want to do with the money at the end of the year, the profits, we vote. And when we think about the day-to-day operations and management, workers have a greater say over what happens. So basically what that amounts to is a certain amount of values, right? So worker control. If workers control the business, they manage the business, if they own the business, they have a fair amount of say in what actually goes on within the business, meaning that those workers then are not left to the whims of a couple of owners or a couple of shareholders. They actually have a say. They have a greater amount of control in the workplace. There's nonstop learning. Something that Terron and I are going to talk about in a bit is that becoming an owner is a different experience. If you own a business, you're not just going to need to do your own role, right? You're going to have to know how to do the books. You might have to know how to do the marketing. You might have to figure out your suppliers. You have to figure out all of these different things that make up what it means to be in a business. So when you're in a cooperative and you're a worker owner, you have a chance to continuously learn other aspects of the role, of the work, of the business, so that you can properly be an owner within that space. Now, it's not for everyone. It's sometimes actually quite challenging. And it takes a fair amount of continuous skill building for some folks too. It's not going to be an overnight thing, but rather a journey that folks, the workers, go to becoming owners. And then community benefit. If we think about a business, let's say, Terron, you're going to speak about a business later on, but or your business rather. Some businesses, when they shut down, they just close, they leave, or somebody buys it and they actually just sell it for scraps. Cooperatives actually have a fair amount of resilience. They tend to weather economic instability better. Because if you're a worker and an owner, you see the scope of the business. You want the business to survive because at the end of the day, that directly, you see the profits, you see the benefit of that business being sustainable. Another important thing about the community benefit aspect is there are certain folks who have a really hard time getting jobs. Formerly incarcerated folks. These are folks that can have challenges getting a new job after they get out. Undocumented folks, sometimes they have really precarious workplaces because they can't actually find that pathway to a real job in some ways. Now, a cooperative could be a great pathway for folks who are formerly incarcerated, and also, depending on how you structure it, a cooperative could actually be a way for undocumented folks to actually be worker owners of the business itself. So it allows for that more sustainable, continuous, and kind of that living wage job that is perhaps unattainable with the current structure of things. I'm going to pause and see if there's any general questions from this kind of run through of what cooperatives are. No? Ron, is there anything you would add on this portion? All good? Okay, all good. This clicker is fun. Oh, here we go. Okay. So this video is going to be another perspective from worker owners. And it's going to really delve into what does it mean to be a worker owner. And this is a really interesting co-op too. I'm going to kind of fill you in on some fun facts about this group after we hear from our worker owner here.
We do the hardest work, but we don't get paid for what we do. It took a while for us to get at least $15 an hour when I feel that we deserve more, because in reality, we're there more than the family, we're there more than the nurses. This is not for everybody. A lot of us take the training, but we don't make it. We go to a client's home, we see what it's all about, and it's like, oh no, this is not for me. Taking care of somebody that you don't even know that may even speak to you not correctly. They think that you're a maid, they think that you're there, they think that they're the one that pays you. I think everyone should be a worker's owner because it's a lot to go with the check. It's a lot of perks. You can actually say, I own one piece of cooperative home care. Because remember, home care, the pay is low. So any type of dividend or any type of extra money that you get, it's a blessing.
CHCA is the largest cooperative in the country. They have over 2,000 worker owners. They train annually around 600 folks in the Bronx to become home health care aides. They have a really cool model that they utilize where they work with a nonprofit entity to actually train up folks so that they can access grant funding to support the business itself. And so something that we actually do at Catalyst is we are kind of interested in developing a model similar to this to generate that scale so that folks can get access to that training and grant funding through us, but then also have that opportunity to generate income and wealth for themselves as well. So I'm just going to click through. Okay, cool. So cooperative sector in the U.S., there are around 6,500 worker owners in the country. There's 612 known worker cooperatives. The median size of these businesses is around 6 people, so they're not too large. The worker owners at the largest cooperative, the wage gap between the CEO, the top person at CHCA, and the lowest is 2 to 1. If you look at normal businesses of that size, it's not 2 to 1, not close. And there are a variety of industries that folks are involved in, from cleaning, childcare, landscaping, healthcare, contracting. It's all over. Sorry, the formatting here is a little off, so shuffle it down a bit. But cooperatives can exist in really any industry. The thing that's really important about cooperatives is, the profits have to be there, and there has to be a fair amount of trust built between the worker owners. Almost. Okay, cool. So by the numbers for Miami, what's going on? We actually have no worker cooperatives in the Miami-Dade County. There's one worker cooperative in West Palm Beach, and they were converted, meaning that they were a normal business that sold to their workers. In Miami-Dade County, Catalyst is one of the organizations that is focused on developing worker cooperatives. Our program is primarily a startup cooperative. We work with folks who come together to actually launch a business. So we are really working with people from like the very, very beginning of the idea all the way to the end when they launch. We have about 5 groups that are in incubation currently. They're at various different stages. One, by the end of next week, could be the first cooperative in Miami. There's others that by the beginning of next year, they might be cooperatives. There's others that it's going to take some time, because often the pathway, the thing that we at Catalyst are working to do is to engage folks that are predominantly excluded from the normal economy. So we work primarily with low wealth women of color when it comes to our cooperative development programming. Meaning that what we try to focus on and what we have tried to build out isn't always going to be a one-size-fits-all for everyone. We have to be cognizant of childcare responsibilities, of household responsibilities, of actually doing another job, because until a cooperative generates income, it can't be a viable option for folks sometimes to just not work for a while. And so we have, of the cooperatives, we have a marketing cooperative, we have 2 bookstore cafe cooperatives, we have a humane bee extracting and education cooperative, and then we have a property solutions cooperative. The folks that are kind of in our pipeline are, we have a food co-op, we have a health and wellness cooperative, and then we have another health and wellness cooperative. They focus more on mental health. And the first is they focus on trans health. And so basically, that's like the lay of the land at this point. And Catalyst is one of the organizations, along with Project Equity, along with Oberon, along with these other groups that you'll hear a little bit more about later, that are working together. And I want to focus for a little bit on this one cross-sector collaboration that we have. So traditionally, within cooperative businesses, there are, I would say, 3 challenges broadly. And Terron's going to correct me on that, I'm almost positive. But there are 3 broad categories that folks have trouble with. One is the beginning of the pipeline, getting workers. Getting people together to come together is really hard. I don't know if any of you recently have worked on a group project. I can't stand group projects sometimes. It's very challenging. But what we need is to develop some sort of pipeline at the beginning. The second portion that can often be a challenge is the technical assistance. It's not always there within any ecosystem. And then the third aspect that's challenging is the funding. Cooperatives as businesses have challenges getting funding because of their structure. Because it's not just one owner, it's multiple owners, and there are administrative challenges from like the SBA, local loan funds, those kinds of things. People are a little wary of distributing loans to cooperatives. Now, we have a cross-sector project that we've been working on with 2 partners. One is Miami Worker Center. Miami Worker Center is an organization that is critically focused on the issues of domestic workers and trying to organize them to build power for themselves within their wages, within the labor law, and within housing. They operate in that first sphere of the challenge. They operate as that pipeline. They're thinking, and they have a membership base. The second part is Catalyst as a technical assistance provider. And then the third part is a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution. Their entire role in this project is to hold resources, to hold funds for cooperatives. And one of the things that they're going to focus on is patient lending. So typically, when you take out a loan, you have to start paying it back immediately. They're kind of thinking differently about what does it look like to support a business as they get off the ground. What does it look like to support specifically a worker cooperative comprised of Black and brown women who are also immigrants, also family, like mother, they have all these other things that they're taking into account, right? So we're trying to have a loan fund that is going to be patient for them. And that's one of the loan funds. And then also, before we go to this question and answer with Terron and I, we also have a community investment cooperative that Catalyst is developing. When we think about cooperatives, there are a couple of different categories of them. Worker cooperatives are the one we're focusing on today. There's also producer cooperatives. That's going to be like Ocean Spray that we saw before. There's consumer cooperatives. I don't know if any of you are familiar with REI. That's like a consumer cooperative. You spend more money, you get more benefit from them typically. There's also financial cooperatives. There's also land cooperatives. And land cooperatives are a little different. And so what we're trying to do with this community investment cooperative is pull together resources from community members to just buy back the block, basically. And so what we have done is kind of started to raise funds so that we, Catalyst, can buy the property and then we can start to sell it back to community members in North Miami. Now, if y'all are familiar with like where North Miami sits in Miami-Dade County, it's higher elevation, it's seeing some sort of climate speculation, if you will. And so what's happening is that community members from that neighborhood are being pushed out in some way. And so it is our hope that this can become not only an opportunity for this community to develop wealth and ownership, but it could be a way of pushing back against some of that displacement that's happening in North Miami and perhaps other neighborhoods in Miami if we can get enough resources together. Cool. So I have with me today a good friend and colleague, Terron. Terron, I kind of ran through all that presentation to basically set the table for what are worker cooperatives. We all kind of come to some of this work from different perspectives. I'd be really curious to know, how did you actually get involved with cooperatives? Like, what's your journey to this? Because you're a lawyer, you have traveled the world. Like, what drew you to cooperatives?
Great question. Thank you for the presentation also, Deshaun. I was quiet and I didn't want to chime in because I was taking notes on what you were saying. One of the answers that I was surprised that I didn't hear when we were talking about when you think of a business, what's the word association that comes to mind, is I think jobs. And I'm interested in quality jobs. And so as I was kind of thinking about you asking me this first question, I've had professional experiences as a teacher, as an organizer, as a lawyer, as a researcher. And I was just trying to find, truth be told, a way to combine these different skill sets and these different experiences. And entrepreneurship kind of seems like a really natural umbrella to be able to like do a lot of things, to be able to pursue a mission when you have like a variety of interests. And then my background just has me kind of inclined to do a bit of good. I'm from Miami, Florida originally. I'm from a neighborhood in the city called Liberty City, specifically Brownsville, if you like really know Miami. I'm from Brown Sub. Just had a number of experiences that people in my zip code don't get. Just isolate one. To be able to be a graduate from New York University School of Law, I think the last time I did the math, it unofficially costs you about $20,000 just to get to law school, between studying for your LSAT, taking your LSAT, applying to school, maybe you do some visits, your deposit, your tuition, and so on and so forth. The annual household income, the median in my zip code, is $18,000 for a household. So, people where I'm from are kind of priced out of even that pursuit. So that's a long way of saying I knew that whatever type of career I would pursue would have some sort of justice element, like just kind of trying to reciprocate or reimburse my community for the opportunities I've gotten. And in my time as a teacher, I taught in Atlanta. I was a special education teacher for elementary school kids. And I thought that was like a really amazing public service experience. I thought I would have an opportunity to have a lot of change. And teachers are real soldiers domestically. But I realized like my kids were kind of screwed once they left the school because they were poor.
Yeah.
I mean, just to keep it 100. Even now, the school that I worked at doesn't exist anymore because there was a more attractive development project that could use the space. So they demote the school, the projects that were kind of adjacent to the school where all the students came from, no longer there. So I was like really influenced by that experience of trying to do something about injustice and fairness and equity as a teacher. And I was like, okay, how can you change economic lots? Yeah. And so the next professional experience I had was actually back in Miami as an organizer, and I was trying to help educators get in different leadership positions in the city so that we could make a better school to workforce pipeline. Sure. And that experience was amazing. But I'm trying to chart through this so I can show you a larger trend. The third big professional experience I had, I was a death penalty attorney. So I represented folks who were sentenced to capital punishment, the electric chair or what have you, in Montgomery, Alabama. And fortunately, knock on wood, I didn't lose a case. So if you think about what happens if you lose a case, that's a really good thing to be proud of. But one trend in all 9 of the clients I had during my time there, it was like we kind of found ourselves in this suboptimal position with the law, with the justice system, because we didn't really have economic opportunities. Didn't really have like a sort of job prospect or a chance to pursue a life with dignity and meaning. So I kind of fall to the margins of society, maybe the black market, find myself in a bad set of circumstances. One thing leads to another. Now I'm in a whole heap of trouble. So if you notice, the through line there is like, at least in this country, a job means so much. Yeah. It's like an opportunity to have meaning and identity. It's a way to contribute to your family, your community, the country. It's also a method to express yourself. And so when I was pursuing entrepreneurship, I was trying to buy a business because in those stops, I tried to start a business. And if anybody has tried to start a business or something, it's hard as hell. It's really hard, A lot of people don't talk about this because it's not sexy, but plenty of people fail. And I was one of those people who failed maybe 3 times at trying to start a new initiative. So I said, okay, I got to look at this in a different way. And I thought maybe I could become an entrepreneur by purchasing an existing business and then putting my imprint on it, okay? So I moved back to Miami and I was trying to find this opportunity, trying to find the right deal, right spot to move in. And as I was kind of going around trying to find money to organize this endeavor, I learned of this really interesting way of organizing people called employee ownership or cooperative economics. And to kind of land this plane, the big way it was explained to me is in traditional businesses, all the workers, we rent our labor to the business, okay? So in the example that you gave, working at the amusement park, you're renting yourself, right? Your work for however many hours, whatever interval at the concession stand, Well, a cooperative is still a business as you articulate it, but in this business model, the workers rent the capital of the business. And it's the same components, same ingredients, but it's a different way to change the relationship with the people to that organization. So I kind of saw this as a way to like do my thing that I was, on the journey to do, but also still make the good, have the change, and have the impact on people's lives that I aspire to have. So that's how I kind of landed into this space.
So, I mean, you've worn a lot of hats. You've done a lot of different things. You've worked at Project Equity. You have a company, Yancy. You own your own business. So, I guess can you speak a little bit more to the experience, perhaps that you found along the way of the difference between a worker and an owner, and perhaps like what do workers need to consider as they make that transition to owners?
Good question. So I think Sean and I talk about this all the time. Like in our space, when people who are trying to beat the drum for cooperatives and cooperative economics, we really make it sound super cool to be an owner. Like you just, right? Like, all right, like you were a worker yesterday, you're gonna sign some papers, now you're an owner, now the money's raining in, right? Like that's kind of the story. No offense to the videos, but it's a lot different, And I think the primary difference is raise your hand if you've worked a job, internship, any type of job. Okay, so we all know about this. You know, when you go home, you're home, right? Like, you know, you can do whatever you want to do when you're home. You know, it's someone else's problem if something happens to the facility. You know, if there's an outraged customer, it's like, I did my discrete portion of this project and now I'm off. And when you're an owner, your relationship changes completely. You are now like responsible and culpable for the business in a different way. And Deshaun and I, we discuss this all the time, like, there are trade-offs. There's upside to it. You can earn more money, right? Earning more money is a great thing. You'll have more ownership over your work experience, maybe more stability in your job. So it's not like, you know, I have this job today. I think Twitter laid off tens of thousands of people in a matter of days. That couldn't happen in a cooperative. So that's a positive. But the trade-off is that you might have to learn skills that you wouldn't otherwise be inclined to learn. And that takes effort and commitment. And there's going to be some challenges with that. You might have to weigh in on decisions that you probably didn't really think about or have a desire to think about prior to ownership. But I think the trade-offs really reconcile themselves when you experience the difference in how you're viewed as a leader in the various circles and ecosystems that you travel. Really quickly, if I can just share. So I purchased a business in 2020. It's an apparel manufacturing company. And it was like a legacy business. So it was around for about 25 years. The owner was going on 80 when he was ready to retire or sell the business. And so the other workers in the business were around maybe average age 50, 55, you know, it's kind of on the tail end of the workforce age spectrum. So one of the first things we did was we tried to like extend some jobs to local youth, you know, college kids, high schoolers, you know, or people that are right outside of the college age. Hey, you guys want to come work? We can kind of give this business a fresh breath of life. But we want to do it with a cooperative lens to it. And I have one specific teammate who's been with us maybe 18 months. So from kind of like the beginning of this to where we are now. And this is a woman who couldn't be caught dead in the store by herself when she first started, because it's just like a lot happening. There's customers coming in and out, the phone's ringing off the hook. There's, you know, emails coming in. You know, it's a lot to multitask. You got to keep the grounds together. You got to pursue orders. And I'm proud to say right now, she's at the business right now, and I'm here with you all. She's the only person there. She's quite literally running the entire business, from like what the cash count was for today, where we're going to end, whatever the inventory levels are, whatever orders need to be fulfilled, whatever customer service has to happen on foot traffic, on the phone or digitally. And to see her growth has been incredible, because other people respond to that growth. Like, people come now to the store and ask for her versus just like, can anybody help me? She has a clientele, she has customers. She's secured deals with her school. For example, people come to her as the go-to practitioner for this service. And I've been able to watch that over 18 months as she's transitioned from somebody who's just, you know, working a 6-hour shift to somebody who's like, I think I'm gonna come in on Saturday because I got some things I need to get done, and I could stand to earn 3 times as much money as I would earn normally this Christmas season.
Yeah. I mean, that's really powerful in terms of seeing that trajectory of an individual as they go. I mean, at Catalyst, we as I mentioned before, we work with folks from the very early stages. Like, you know, they might not know anything about business. They might not know much about cooperatives. We have to bring them together and kind of help build the team out. That's always fun because, you know, there's a lot of conflict resolution, thinking critically about what are the operations of the business. We're building with the nuts and bolts. We're building everything. We're building the entire plane. Terron, you focus and have focused traditionally on some of that conversion work of going from a traditional business to a cooperative business. Can you speak a bit more about what you see as perhaps some of the challenges and opportunities within that space, the conversion, the co-op conversion space?
Okay, the way I want to answer this is, anybody play video games in the room at all? Some gamers? Okay, so I play this game on maybe like beginner's difficulty, maybe medium difficulty. He's playing on like expert, on hard. I think that's the difference between trying to do cooperative work at the startup phase versus trying to facilitate transitions. Okay, so just as a framing, I basically look for businesses that exist, that have existed for preferably a decade or more. You know, there's profitability and revenue being generated. A lot of times there's an actual physical place involved. There's like customers, you know, it's a business and we're looking for owners who are either looking to exit because they're like at retirement age, something crazy like 70% of small business owners in this country have no retirement strategy, succession strategy. I'm telling you guys this because 99% of America's businesses are small businesses. So if I were somebody I'm 36 years old, if I were somebody who were graduating from undergraduate and I were looking for a leadership opportunity, I were looking for a business opportunity, the country is quite literally replete with these opportunities of businesses that need some sort of transition in leadership and as a result, ownership. So I do this. And the challenge with that has to do with any type of change management you might think of. You know, you have an owner, in the case of the business that I have in Miami Gardens, it's an 80-year-old man who was a Vietnam veteran, is a Purple Heart, so he's taken a bullet for this country. He was an airline mechanic for Eastern Airline. You guys probably never heard of this airline. It's before my time too. But he came down to Miami working as an airline mechanic, and when some big companies merged and acquired his company, he was laid off. And from that moment, he was like, I'm never gonna have a boss again. Like, I'll never allow this to happen to me again. He went into business for himself. 25, 28 years later, now he's looking for an exit. Only 1 out of every 5 businesses in our country sells. So just think about that. 20% of businesses sells. That means that if all of us have a business, it could be super successful, super large, any industry you want to pick, whatever you want to do, want to make. You know, you look around the room, only 20% of us are going to be able to get somebody to buy it from us. So what happens to the remainder of those businesses? Most people want to bequeath their business to a child in their family or someone in their family or something like that. Well, what happens if, like, because of your success in business, your kid gets to do whatever they want to do and they don't want the business? Okay, so you got to cross that off your list. In this case, the owner that I'm referring to that I work with, his son has been on the police force for 23 years. He's not trying to leave a job that he's about to retire pretty comfortably from to come now run the business. So that's off his list. So what I do is sort of present cooperative economics, cooperatives and employee ownership as an option for owners who are looking to exit. And it usually is a pretty compelling strategy, because if you had a business for a decade or so, you really care about your workers, you built that trust with them, they know how to run the business even if you're not around, and you want to do right by them. You don't want to just sell it to, you know, some folks from Iowa that just are looking to, you know, make a quick buck, maybe graze it and put something else there. In fact, really one quick example, and I'll toss it back to you. The business that I'm referring to, it's called D&N Sports. It's in Miami Gardens, and it's in a plaza along with a Winn-Dixie, a Planet Fitness, and a Foot Locker, okay? And this is relevant because it's the longest tenant of this plaza along with Winn-Dixie. So plenty of other businesses have come and gone, okay? Bless you. In the event that this business would leave that plaza, I'm almost certain it'd be replaced with some sort of national brand, big box business. I mean, you guys seen these plazas, right? Where you might have a Five Below and a Ross, Burlington Coat Factory. You know, they're kind of popping up as a project everywhere. Nothing against that, but it's a preservation strategy. And so people are really interested in that. Now, going back to you, Deshaun, I think you have like a huge cognitive hurdle, because you're trying to get people at time one to think about doing business in a kind of novel, radical way, maybe work with people that they don't really know, but they have shared and common interests. I don't have a lot of those challenges on my side. It's really trying to find and source the most willing partner and then cultivate the relationship from there. Everything else kind of can take care of itself.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think that it's a similar trust building exercise in some ways, and I think critically, and this might show up in the transition work that you do, but there's a confidence building that also comes with it too, where some folks might feel nervous about becoming an owner. They might not necessarily want to take on that extra work on a Saturday, right? One of the things that we've started to do in partnership with the Miami Worker Center is engaging a membership base that are primarily composed of people who are either already working for themselves independently in some ways, or they are independent contractors. And so in some ways, they already know how to operate their own form of business. So we really just kind of encourage them to start to see themselves as business owners and how they can kind of come together because of their shared interests to do something together. It's not easy. It's quite challenging. And I think that, what it is both being a cheerleader in some ways of like encouraging that like go forward, keep doing it, and also the level setting, because for some folks they just don't have the time to build a business. And so you also have to try to meet people where they are, and it's not always going to be that everybody's ready to start the business from day one, but rather it's that relationship building over time that gets somebody to the point where they can actually say, maybe I can do this, and actually maybe I can rely on and share the risk with some of my folks so that we can have greater benefit for not only ourselves, but for our communities and our families.
So let me ask you this question. So I think one of the things that has me fearful of like startup cooperatives is, and maybe you all can relate to this, you're all students, I'm assuming. If you have a bunch of independent practitioners or entrepreneurs that do their own thing, to your point of trust, there's like some real sharing of materials that have to happen, right? It's like, something as basic as, what are we going to call this cooperative now? People get so wed to like the name of their business, the ethos and the logo and the branding. That's like one of the first coolest things that you do when you start a business. Mm-hmm. And so like, how do you reconcile, this person might have more goodwill in the community or more of a following than someone else, or like bookkeeping, something as simple, right? Sensitive as that. I might be excellent at accounting and have all my affairs in order. You might be killing it, crushing it in business, but like if I, look through your actual corporate administration, it's not the cleanest, right? Yeah. So I don't really encounter that with the conversion work because it's one business where you're trying to make the workers into owners, but I'm interested to know how you jump that hurdle.
Yeah, so I mean, our entire program is basically constructed with a popular education model. So Pop Ed is basically a space where you work to build understanding from sort of some individual and shared understanding of the world. So when I asked before about a business, I was trying to get a sense of what's the thing that comes to mind for you all so that we can kind of build from that foundation and move forward together. I might, and this is an example pulled straight from a session that we had the other day, when we were looking into the domestic workers at the Miami Worker Center, and basically we asked them, how many of you have built a family budget? Everyone in the room raised their hands. Now if I asked them, hey, how many of you have built up a business budget, the hands wouldn't have been raised in some ways. But they do have familiarity with it, and it does open that invitation, that space, to start to build and generate that confidence along the way while also learning. So almost every aspect of our program is, I would say, about 50%, 60% sometimes learning, education, technical assistance, and about 40% of them actually doing the thing. So at the very early stages of our program, we focus on building up that understanding of cooperatives. From there, we transition to, okay, like let's actually build this business plan. We work through it piece by piece by piece together. And so along the way, to your point, Terron, we really have to be mindful of the ways that people are relating to one another as well. We can't just assume that just because they are all they're members of the Miami Worker Center, that they're going to day one agree entirely on everything. But rather, there are other critical steps along the way before they even come to us within this program that we have. There is a leadership development portion where they're going to learn quite a bit about like how they can kind of work together and collaborate on policy to get some sort of shared understanding of the economic structure of Miami-Dade County so that they can effectively advocate together. They're building up that muscle, that trust that they have with each other in that space. Then they're going to go through some sort of financial capability support where they kind of get together and piece their own individual finances so that they can then project forward within a business space. So along the way, we're always trying to be mindful of where people are approaching this, how they can kind of get to know each other better, but then at the same time, not presuming that everybody knows how to start a business, because I'd be curious, when you were starting your business, was it an individual endeavor, or was it how many other folks were involved in trying to support you along the way? Did you have that assistance there?
That's a good question. Short answer, no.
Okay.
No. I mean, I think it's funny, you talked about like not liking group projects. I like group projects. But also, this is kind of like a group project, so
make it work.
But so I think I always kind of collaborate with,
Yeah.
you know, I was the only child for like a good 13 years or something like this. So this was my friend making strategy, like you want to do something cool together kind of thing. So I think it naturally progressed when I went to college. And you know, you don't call this thing a business. Maybe it's a program at school, then it becomes like a club or an initiative, right? But then you're confronted with this thing called the real world where you have to earn money at some point. And so you try to figure out, how can I do this?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of where the proverbial failures come from. Those are just lessons learned, you know what I mean? Because you're stumbling upon opportunity. But I think the thrust of your question is, if I had some sort of guidance, mentorship, and technical assistance at time one, I think that this would have been a very obvious approach to cooperate with folks, you know? Not only because two brains are better than one, not only because when you think about like operating vehicles, a lot of times you have like the pilot and then the navigator. But there's also just the fact that, you know, it takes village to kind of do a lot of things. One other thing I want to say is, anybody in here familiar with BET? Black Entertainment Television? Okay, cool. So I think I might have told you this. So the founder and CEO of BET is Bob Johnson. I think he was, if not the first, the second African-American billionaire in the country. I saw some YouTube video, like it came up like on my auto feed or something like that. He was at a college talking to some business students, and someone asked him like, what would be your word of advice for any would-be kind of business leader coming up? And he was like, I would advise you to partner and cooperate with people who are doing the same things that you're doing. He was coming from a pure capitalist perspective. He's like, I just see too many redundancies out here. Everybody's trying to start a swim care line or a clothing brand or, you know, this, that, and the third. No, he's not trying to discourage entrepreneurship, but there's just not enough room in the market for all of those individual businesses. It's sort of like, one of the trade-offs, one of the downsides to like social media and digital tools, us being able to just kind of start up our own thing and hang our own shingle so quickly and so cheaply, has a little bit kind of discouraged the partnership and collaboration. Yeah. And so I just think that like if I had, you know, some North Star guidance, a compass at time one when I first started, I would absolutely be looking to my left, my right, and saying, what can we build together? How can we share it? How can we go?
So you've heard a lot from us at this point. Are there any questions that you all have? Things that you would like to explore a bit further?
So it's more for you because you talked about like the transitioning of businesses to co-ops. When you work with businesses and you see them transition to the co-ops, how does working as a co-op affect like worker efficiency? Have you seen like worker efficiency, like people more dedicated to the company and then therefore their work becoming more efficient or?
Yeah, great question, first of all. Incredible question. The short answer is yes. So, but I want to go one step back before your question starts. I think the coolest learning is so many businesses already operate with like cooperative principles and practices. They're just not calling it that. Right? So I think that's just one thing to just keep in mind is, you know, people collaborate, they partner with folks in their industry, they share resources, you know, people do, now that you are here, it's going to be one of those things where you can't unsee. This is actually a very common business practice. It's like, let's leverage our weaknesses to become stronger together, quite simple. So what I find is when you name that for people, that, okay, now like this is a specific cooperative practice that you're going to implement and start to execute on, not only does it yield more productivity and more efficiency, but people start to train their mind's eye to look for more opportunities to do that. So that's one thing I want to say. Two other points is, in my business, one way I've seen a cooperative transition really affect how workers perform their task is it opens up for a variety of styles in how to do something, okay? So just think, if Deshaun's my manager, he's not all of our managers, right? You know, he has a goal in mind, what he wants us to do. He knows how many of us are in here, how much time, you know, we're gonna devote to doing it. And for the most part, he's gonna tell us to do it like this because it's his kind of vision for what's a tried and true best practice. But you know your strengths, you know your best time of day working, you know what supports you need, I know how I move. And sometimes it can be very difficult for us to try to squeeze ourselves into the contours of a manager's vision. But I think when you have a more cooperative structure, you change the amount of agency that workers have at their jobs. They become more vocal, and so they can explain to you, or explain to one another rather, here's one way we could make $10 by giving a person a $10 bill, and this is a metaphor, but you could also use 10 singles, and that still gets you $10. You could also use 2 5s, and that can get you $10. And so just to make this very real, the business that I run, one of the things that we do is we do custom apparel services. So like embroidery, screen printing, vinyling, like any type of garments you want to make, okay? And I have professionals now who could make that hoodie that you have on, the Reebok hoodie, 4 different people might do it 4 different ways, but they can get the same outcome. Some might do it faster than the others, but it changes the relationship for them all trying to make that hoodie the same way, and maybe mistakes occurring, maybe their pleasure at the workplace goes down, or maybe the quality just isn't as good. So that's just a concrete example to your question.
Well, thank you so much for this. This was absolutely fantastic, very enlightening. An absolute pleasure to have you both here. And again, if any of you have any questions, Anna, our assistant director, and Melanie, our graduate assistant in charge of communications especially, but in all things guru and GLM alum, are here, and you guys are more than welcome to hang out and we can chat. Thank you. So before you do, I just want to remind you that this is our last TTR for the fall 2022 session. This QR code right here, I want to get some feedback, right? If you want to give me any kind of information or requests on what kind of speakers you want to see for the spring 2022 series, 2023. They're moving quickly. For the spring series for 23, and if you'd like to follow us on Instagram, Go Global FIU, or check out our goglobal.fiu.edu/TTR page, and that's where you can keep up with what's upcoming for Tuesday Times Roundtable. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.